What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 26 of Godzillatober, and I am exhausted, but we're almost there and there's no stopping yet. So today we're going over GMK, which I'm going to refer to it for ease of title, but it's actually called Godzilla, Mothra, Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack, which is quite the title, so we're just going to call it GMK. Let's go. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. I'm Jared Fearing. I'm a lifelong Godzilla fan and a big fan of Halloween. And nothing says Halloween like monster movies. So this year, for the month of October, we're going to review every single Godzilla movie, from Gojira all the way to Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire. So join me this month for a new video every single day and see if I go insane in the process. Let's get to it. GMK, which came out in 2001, was thankfully drastically different from the previous two movies. If you've listened to my previous two episodes, you'll know that I don't like the Millennium suit. It's not the last we've seen of it, unfortunately, but let's focus on this film. The design for Godzilla is drastically different than anything that we've seen, and frankly, I love the design. Its lips move, it has eye movement that's actually kind of hard to tell whether it's an animatronic or whether they just digitally gave him a CGI blink, but it looks great. I'm very excited about this new Godzilla design. And it's kind of a shame because this is the only movie we see Godzilla look like this. And in the past, I've referred to things as looking like, Frog Godzilla. This is kind of like Devil Godzilla. He has like a really, really evil design, but it's just so interesting. The white eyes is like very anime. The long white fingernails looks great. He's got kind of a pot belly. It's just such an interesting take on the character. I really actually love this design of Godzilla. Now, like I've been complaining about in the Millennium films, the CGI here is not always amazing, but it's used a lot more intelligently and sparingly. They use it for things like adding environmental explosions or dust in the background or some fire effects. Near the end of the movie, they do kind of use it in a few ways that it's a little bit overboard and some of the scenes don't look as good, but for the most part, this movie looks great. They make a lot of really wise decisions. The miniatures look great. All the character designs are pretty good. I love Godzilla. I love Baragon. The King Ghidorah design we'll talk about in a little bit. I have kind of mixed feelings about it. I respect it. The Mothra design lets me down a smidge, and that's partially because a large percentage of the Mothra that we see in this is in fact CGI, and so it doesn't quite come across as well when we've got a great real suitmation Baragon, Godzilla, King Ghidorah. So this movie also just has a really interesting story. A reporter who works for kind of like a pseudo-serious news network making like monster documentaries is trying to track down the leads of maybe the return of Godzilla. And in this movie, they treat Godzilla, the 1954 stuff still happened, but they treat it like a myth or like a legend at this point. Like people, they acknowledge that Godzilla is a thing, but they don't really believe that it actually happened, or it didn't happen to the extent that people are saying it did. And so it's kind of fallen into the way of like myth and legend. And I find that very interesting, especially as bad omens kind of start to arrive and make it seem like Godzilla is going to be revived or come back. And in fact, that is exactly what is happening. On the whole train of like myth and legend, this movie also uses kind of like mythical prophecies and stuff like that to be part of the storyline. And they did that kind of thing in the Showa era, but it was usually around like psychics and the prophecy of like King Caesar coming back and stuff like that. It's kind of in that vein, but they even go a little bit stronger. And they have guardian monsters that are supposed to protect against Godzilla in like a mythological sense. And the guardian monsters are Baragon, who has a great design. He's just a chunky little guy. I love Baragon in this movie. Baragon is really interesting too. If you don't really know the backstory on it, Baragon is from a movie called Frankenstein Conquers the World, which is a really good lesser-known Toho movie that's a non-Godzilla movie. Toho makes lots of movies, by the way, not just Godzilla, and just not just monster movies. They make lots of different genres as well. But that's another kaiju movie that's very good, and I don't think a lot of people have seen it. And the sequel, War of the Gargantuas, is also very good. I digress. Baragon is from Frankenstein Conquers the World, and he appeared very briefly in Destroy All Monsters. They show him just kind of walking around a little bit, but he doesn't really do very much. In this movie, he's actually a central character, and he's the first guardian monster we see fight Godzilla, and it's actually really sad because Godzilla just beats the tar out of him, and poor little Baragon's fighting for his life, trying to get away, and Godzilla just absolutely atomizes him. They do a great job in this movie of really making Godzilla seem powerful and vindictive. He's killing like a lot of civilians. The first time we see his atomic breath go off, people see like a mushroom cloud in the distance, obviously echoing like the nuclear capacity of Godzilla. I really think this is the most evil or malicious Godzilla that we've seen in any of them, and I like it because they paint him like a real villain, almost to the point where it's kind of like an anime sense, like I mentioned, but I like that. They do it so well. This movie understands the balance between seriousness and absurdity. There's a lot of really silly and kind of like funny moments. There's a moment that I actually find really genuinely humorous. There's people at like tourists at like an Outlook, and they see Baragon coming off in the distance, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, a giant monster!" And then this couple that are there, the husband is like, "All right, like get a quick picture with the monster, and then we have to run." And the wife goes to like pose for a photo with Baragon in the background. And this movie is from 2001. That's a really hilarious scene because it's even more likely to happen now with like Instagram and TikTok and all that stuff. You know, if there was some massive disaster where like a monster was destroying everything, you know there would be like TikTokers and stuff trying to get in front of it and like trying to film videos with the monster in the background and be like, "Oh, it's getting closer." That is very realistic. And during that, like, get a photo and run scene, the woman that's posing for the photo looks up in horror and notices that Godzilla has actually appeared. And I think this is the first time we really see him kind of appearing over the top of a hill. And it's incredibly reminiscent and intentionally reminiscent of the original Gojira. When you first see Godzilla, you get a quick glimpse of him over the hilltop. So I really like that throwback. Like I said, the movie hits a nice balance of like absurd scenes like the photo scene, and then it juxtaposes it with a lot of seriousness. You see people that are really injured from Godzilla's attack. You see like triage at the hospital, and people are like laying on stretchers and bloody and bandaged up, and like you see that Godzilla is actually like a horrible force of nature that's killing lots of people being injured. It's just like it's not a good situation. So I think they handle the seriousness of that really well with like the absurdity of the fact that there's like big monsters fighting. This is also maybe the first movie, I'm pretty sure it is, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I think this is the first time that Mothra is introduced and somebody is not trying to buy the egg or like capture and sell Mothra. I could be wrong. I don't think I am though. Please let me know if I am. Mothra and King Ghidorah both come to fight Godzilla. King Ghidorah is revived from like a cave where he breaks out of the ice, or I don't know if that's ice or crystal or whatever, but King Ghidorah comes back and they both go to fight Godzilla. Like I mentioned in the intro, the Mothra CGI is not that good, and that kind of like takes away from it a little bit, but not that much. They use it kind of sparingly, and it's not as egregiously bad as we've seen in the previous two movies. The King Ghidorah design here, it's not my favorite, but god damn it do I respect it. It kind of has like a statue motif almost. It looks almost like it's carved in stone. It's a little bit more blocky, and it's really hard to put my finger on what I feel about it, because I don't dislike it. I think it's a good design, but it just doesn't quite do it the same way for me as like the Heisei Ghidorah or even the Showa Ghidorah, how it had the like nice gold scales. Like I've always really liked that design. So the new one is a little bit more more defined and like thicker pieces almost, and it still looks good. I just happen to like the old designs better is all. When I was in Japan last summer, which was 2023, if you're watching this way off in the future, there was actually a commercial that was airing on Japanese TV where they brought back this Ghidorah, excuse me. They brought back this Ghidorah to help out in this like insane commercial that has like zombies and samurai and it's very interesting. And Japanese TV is it's crazy. I loved watching it when I was in Japan, even though I didn't understand most of what I was looking at. Very, very interesting to watch. Now, I've already established that Godzilla is just like a real villain in this movie, but something I didn't mention is that King Ghidorah is the good guy, and that has really not been done. They kind of do it in the Heisei film in the sense that King Ghidorah is kind of able to be controlled and is used for a force for good near the end of the movie. But this is like he's a guardian for good, and he's on the side of the people. And there's a scene where our documentary news anchor is actually falling into water from a really high height, and one of the Ghidorah heads is able to breathe up a bunch of water and air bubbles that breaks the surface tension so she can fall into the water without dying. So that's pretty cool. The final battle is really interesting, and it really just underlines how powerful Godzilla is. But ultimately, they let Godzilla get taken down by the reporter's father in a submarine that gets eaten by Godzilla. It's pretty interesting. Like, we've not really seen anything like this before, and it's just such a different take. This movie is so different from all the other Godzilla movies. Even now with the MonsterVerse and Shin Gojira and -1, like this movie really stands alone as being its own thing that's completely different than everything. And I really like that about it. So in the end, I love how inventive this movie is. I love the Godzilla design. I love the inclusion of Baragon. It's just such a fun movie. And the main plot with the reporter kind of being like part of this not so good news channel that does like pseudo documentaries, that's a very like Ultraman like storyline, and I like that. There's actually one series of Ultraman where that's kind of the motif of the main characters, is they're like cryptid hunters that do kind of like pseudo reports and they stumble upon kaiju. So it's interesting and familiar in a way that I like, and I highly recommend this movie, especially if you've never seen it before. Prior to rewatching it, I've only seen this movie maybe a couple times in the past, and I really didn't remember it that clearly, and rewatching it was like a real treat. I really enjoyed how original this movie was, and I really think the Godzilla design is quite special for that time. Unfortunately, for our next movie, which is a movie that I'm very excited to talk about, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, they do bring back that goddamn Godzilla 2000 suit. So I guess I've just got to grow to love it. Otherwise, I can't watch these movies ever again because I'll just bitch about it every time. But join me next time for episode 27, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, because there's a lot of really cool things to talk about in that movie too. So I'm excited to get after it. Believe it or not, we're almost done the Millennium series. We only have 3 more movies in this series, and then we're into the modern age. Man, this month has just flown by. But as always, like, subscribe, comment down below. I know a lot of people were not so happy with my Godzilla 2000 and Mega Gyros reviews. Just feel free to like shit talk me in the comments. That's cool too. I'm okay with that. But come back next time. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you for Godzilla against Mechagodzilla.